On this Tuesday night, a terrifying incident at 30,000 feet. A 737 engine explodes, a window shatters, and a woman is nearly sucked out. So, what went wrong?
Also tonight, the life and legacy of former U.S. First Lady Barbara Bush, who has died at 92.
And how someone used this image, an editorial cartoon showing the country supporting Saskatchewan, to cash in on the Humboldt tragedy. This is The National.
A woman is dead tonight after the sort of mid-air trauma that's one of the worst fears of flyers everywhere. An engine exploded mid-flight aboard a Southwest passenger jet from New York to Dallas, carrying 144 shocked passengers.
All of a sudden, we just heard this loud bang.
It happened aboard Southwest Flight 1380, about 30 minutes into the trip.
Felt like one of the engines went out, the oxygen mask dropped.
Its left engine failed, part of its covering ripped off, and the shrapnel shattered a window.
I hear this noise and everything shakes up, and I look outside and it's totally broken apart.
Terrified passengers forced to breathe through oxygen masks, some posting images on social media of what they thought were their final moments, including Marty Martinez streaming the harrowing experience live on Facebook.
It felt like it was free falling, and of course everyone's freaking out, everybody's crying.
There's a panic once the window broke and she was out of the window. Everyone kind of rushed in to pull her back into the plane.
The mother of two from New Mexico died in hospital.
This is a very sad day, and on behalf of the entire Southwest family, I want to extend my deepest sympathies.
7 other people were treated for minor injuries. A remarkably calm flight crew is being credited for safely landing the plane.
As far as we can tell, the safety systems on board the aircraft worked as designed for that type of a descent.
All that cell phone footage will help the National Transportation Safety Board, which is leading the investigation. Officials are on the scene tonight in Philadelphia. Their focus will be that damaged engine. Unusual for it to fail mid-flight. Even more unusual, how it exploded. David Common looking at that angle tonight.
Though the outside was roaring in and passengers filling with fear, on the flight deck, this was a calm and ordered response.
Could you have the medical meet us there on the runway as well? We've got injured passengers.
Injured passengers, okay. And is your airplane physically on fire?
No, it's not on fire, but part of it's missing. They said there was a hole and someone went out.
I'm sorry, you said there was a hole and somebody went out?
That passenger died, the first fatality ever in Southwest history. The passenger was held reportedly inside the plane by others. So what happened to the aircraft that the window got so violently torn away?
It had to have been parts from the engine that left the engine.
Larry Vance is a former accident investigator with Canada's Transportation Safety Board.
There are a whole series of blades that make up a rotating fan at the front of the engine. If one of those fan blades happened to crack and break off, it would leave the front of the engine and do the type of damage that we see.
The engine on Southwest 1380 was inspected just 2 days ago. It's a CFM56, the most commercially successful jet engine in history, and its manufacturer designed it to fail safely. That's to say, if one of the fan blades breaks free, it should be absorbed into the engine and out the exhaust, as seen in this test. Looks awful, but designed to keep parts away from the plane. It's called an uncontained engine failure and is extremely rare.
About 3 or 4 a year.
The last major incident, though, was just 19 months ago, and also on a Southwest Airlines plane. With the engine damaged, pilots raced to safety in Pensacola, Florida. Whatever happened today will take months to understand, focusing on what broke off and whether maintenance or design was a factor. David Common, CBC News, Toronto.
If you travel by plane, chances are you have flown on a Boeing 737. It's the best-selling jetliner in the world, and Southwest happens to be its largest operator. The airline has more than 700 planes in its fleet, all of them 737s. The model involved in today's accident is widely used around the world. About 7,000 of them are in operation right now, and it has a good safety record. Let's take a quick look at what else is ahead tonight. The Model 3 is supposed to be Tesla's big breakthrough, but again tonight, production is suspended. We'll look at the seemingly unshakable faith of Elon Musk fans.
And new details of a high-level meeting between Washington and Kim Jong-un.
But first, there is anger tonight that people are trying to blatantly profit from a Canadian tragedy. We're talking about the Humboldt Broncos bus crash that claimed 16 lives. Take a look at this, an editorial cartoon from the Halifax Chronicle-Herald that was applauded for how it got to the core of this country's grief. Then it was stolen, slapped onto T-shirts and sold. So we had Kayla Hounsell look into the industry of hijacking grief.
Tedious stuff here.
Bruce McKinnon drew a cartoon that touched people across this country. When the Halifax Chronicle-Herald released his depiction of Canadian hockey players helping an injured player from Saskatchewan, it was shared by thousands online. But it was also horribly misused.
Just such an outrageous breach to profit from somebody's sorrow in this case.
McKinnon was alerted by a Saskatchewan woman that his design had been stolen.
It was being put on T-shirts and printed and sold without permission. We had no idea.
A site called Redbubble was selling the T-shirts for $42 Canadian. The company, based in Australia, bills itself as an online marketplace where artists can sell their work. Redbubble took down the T-shirts after the Herald threatened legal action. And late tonight, an executive from Redbubble told CBC News it will now donate all funds related to the Humboldt tragedy. But this is not an isolated incident. There is bogus Broncos merchandise of all kinds on various sites. This one was taken down after the CBC requested comment from the site.
You're playing on people's sympathies, you're collecting money under false pretenses, because certainly when there's an image like the cartoon, it implies very directly that that money is being collected to be donated to the families of the players and to the team.
There have also been reports of a fake GoFundMe page for the Broncos, although GoFundMe says it has a dedicated team ensuring all money goes to victims and their families. The Better Business Bureau advises people to research campaigns before giving.
Start from the team's website and kind of work outwards from there. So as long as you're starting with a website, a source where you can trust the information, any links that you find from there should be legitimate.
We also found T-shirts exploiting the Parkland shooting, Hurricane Irma, and the conflict in Sudan.
It's really upsetting, and but it obviously is rampant, and it's obviously very hard to shut down.
McKinnon has also been getting requests from people who want to buy prints of his Humboldt drawing. The newspaper is obliging, but donating all proceeds. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
There is anger, too, within the community of Humboldt, where there is a growing hunger for answers about the crash itself. So tonight, Susan Ormiston takes us back to the scene of that tragedy to hear what people are saying, but also to give us a driver's eye view of the landscape.
There is something sad but uplifting about the memorials sprouting from the muddy prairie. 16 crosses mark the spot. A man from nearby Nipawin made them. No one asked him to. So many coming now, looking for some kind of solace.
It's been really hard at the schools. Like, everyone's always talking about it, and it's like, it's not something that just goes away really easily.
What questions do you have?
Why did it have to happen? Like, and why was it just those specific people that died? Like, why did the other people get to live?
The memorial has grown organically, from one small cross to a mound of mementos. Families have made a pilgrimage. There is a lot of pain at this cold, windy intersection, but we're hearing quite a bit of anger now, too. With scant information coming from investigators so far, people want to know what actually happened here and who will pay. There is wide open prairie here with a stop sign at the corner. Truckers are now coming to eyeball the scene. Kevin Sloan needed to.
Had an awful time dealing with this. That's my industry. And when this happens, there's no excuse.
Think somebody should be charged?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is no reason for this. If the road conditions and visibility was like it is now, there's no excuse.
Police did interview the driver, released him, and have laid no charges to date. So this is the route that the trucker would have taken on that Friday afternoon, traveling west on Highway 335 in Saskatchewan. There's good visibility to the north. The bus was coming from the south, and on the south side of this part of the highway, there is a stand of trees blocking visibility at this corner. However, you can see there is a stop sign and a red flashing light at this intersection. As we approach, we can't see south, where the bus was coming from, until about here.
Your heart has to go out to the truck driver. You know, like, no doubt, it's not intentional, you know. It's human error.
Now this has become a very large shrine on this corner. What do you think?
Well, I think it'd be nice to see a permanent memorial or something put up here, you know.
The investigators' report, when it comes, won't bring anyone back. But there is a deep yearning to excavate some sense, however small, out of the brutal moment that stole so many lives. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, near Nipawin, Saskatchewan.
700 kilometers from that crash site, thousands more gathered today to pay tribute to 4 members of the Humboldt Broncos who came from Alberta. So let's take you there. Country singer Paul Brandt opened the ceremony.
Hardworking and God blessed. Yes, sir, thank you, man. The best things around that I have ever seen came from small towns and big dreams. I've been around the world, don't matter anywhere I go.
I've found in the past few days that I have a trigger word that makes me sad, but it makes me happy, and that word is proud. We are so, so, so proud of you, Jackson.
I would be remiss without mentioning Logan's sense of humor. As his teacher, there were a few times that I had to hold him accountable. Okay, it was more than a few. The challenge for me was making sure I did not laugh when doing so, because Logan's sense of humor was beyond his years.
If I were to get the chance to say goodbye, I would say, Parker, I am so grateful to have had the chance to be so close with you. You're an amazing teammate and an even better friend.
He was a great listener and was always there for advice. He would listen and understand, the most important quality in a friend. You never felt judged or misconceived, just truly heard.
Some moving words in a difficult but ongoing story. And Rosie, there was raw emotion too today in a Quebec courtroom.
Yeah, there sure was, Andrew. It was a difficult day there for victims and their families at the sentencing hearing of Alexandre Bissonnette. The court heard from survivors of that 2017 Mosque shooting and the widow of one of the 6 men who were killed. As Jayla Bernstein tells us, they've been stalked by fear and loss since Bissonnette opened fire.
The extent of the destruction left in the wake of Alexandre Bissonnette's deadly attack was painfully obvious in court today. One survivor told the judge, "I see danger even here in court. I imagine it and I create scenarios and I think about how to intervene. Are there children? How do we protect them? I do that everywhere." 6 men were shot and killed at their mosque after evening prayer. They left behind children and widows. Louisa Mohammed Saeed says telling her 3 girls that their father, Abdel Karim Hassan, was dead was the most difficult thing she's ever done. She told the judge, "He won't be there for their graduation ceremony or for their marriages, and my last child will have no memories of her father, and that is so unjust." That sense of injustice was shared by many. Survivors also spoke of regret that they didn't do more to stop Bissonnette. Some wondered if they should have joined Azzedine Soufiane, who tried to disarm the shooter. He died in the process.
Lui, il a eu le courage d'y aller. Nous, on n'a pas eu le courage. Puis, à chaque instant, on pense à ça. Puis, il y a toujours cette question, est-ce qu'on Est-ce qu'on aurait dû y aller ou pas?
But in a touching moment, the judge comforted El Amari, saying, "Everyone in this room would have done the same as you. Those are natural reflexes. The actions of Mr. Soufiane surpass us. That's why we call him a hero." Once the prosecutor and the defense have wrapped up their sentencing arguments, it'll be up to the judge to decide on Alexandre Bissonnet's sentence. He faces a minimum of 25 years before parole, but he could face up to 150 years. Jayla Bernstein, CBC News, Quebec City.
Many of the victims have been struggling to make sense of why Bissonnette walked into the mosque that January evening last year and opened fire. As part of the sentencing hearing, we are getting a clearer sense of his disturbing motivation.
Moi, je voulais sauver les gens. Tu voulais sauver les gens, oui. Sauver les gens des attaques terroristes.
A 3-hour interrogation video aired at the hearing is where Bissonnette described a growing fixation on terrorist attacks. Apparently obsessed with anti-Muslim and anti-immigration policies, police say Bissonnette was reading a lot about Donald Trump from right-wing websites. When questioned about why he did it, Bissonnette said the final straw was Justin Trudeau, saying he would welcome more refugees to Canada, and said he became convinced he and his family would be killed.
On a su que le gouvernement canadien allait prendre plus de réfugiés, ceux qui ne seraient pas admis aux États-Unis seraient rendus ici. Là, j'ai comme perdu la carte.
Bissonnette also researched mass shootings, mostly in the U.S. He appeared to be particularly interested in Dylan Roof, the man who killed 9 people at a Charleston church, and Marc Lepine, who targeted women in the 1989 École Polytechnique massacre. After the shooting, Bissonnette told a social worker that he regretted not having killed more people at the mosque. All of this will be taken into account when the judge hands down his sentence. And as Jayla mentioned, Bissonnette could face 150 years in prison. That is if the judge agrees that his murder sentences should be served consecutively.
And we do have a lot more ahead tonight on The National. She was the matriarch of a Republican dynasty. Barbara Bush has died. We'll look back at her life and her lasting legacy.
And just how far did Canada's spy agency go to make sure a former terror suspect couldn't return home? We have new details in a CBC News investigation.
And another bump in the road for Tesla as it halts production on one of its models again. We'll look at why its die-hard fans aren't worried.
I'm investing in Tesla, but his vision as well. I think it's an inevitable outcome. Full electric vehicles is the future.
Justin Trudeau made history in Paris today. Not only did he become the first Canadian Prime Minister to address the French National Assembly, he was also the first foreign leader invited to do so by Emmanuel Macron. That's perhaps not surprising, given the close relationship the two leaders seem to share. But as Evan Dyer reports tonight, they don't always quite see eye to eye.
Justin Trudeau got a warm reception at France's National Assembly.
Un Canadien descendu d'un charpentier français de La Rochelle.
And when he spoke about Canada's connections to France and his own family's origins in the town of La Rochelle, it was one of several standing ovations he received in a speech that touched on shared history and language, but also shared problems, inequality and economic insecurity that drive voters into the arms of demagogues.
Dans trop de pays, le populisme se
In too many countries, populism is spreading, democracy is eroding. This morning, in a speech to the European Parliament, Trudeau's host, Emmanuel Macron, gave the same warning.
L'illusion du pouvoir fort.
The illusion of strong power, he said, of nationalism, of the abandonment of liberties. I reject this idea that's spreading in Europe. The two also share a commitment to gender equality, and both are keen on the Paris Climate Accord. They might seem to be singing from the same song sheet, but this bromance doesn't extend to issues of migration and multiculturalism.
Le Canada devrait-il laisser la peur et l'inquiétude dicter son avenir?
Trudeau says diversity is a source of strength. Canada should never close its doors to the world.
That's just not who we are.
Dans la zone euro.
Macron took a different tone about taking pride in Europe's history to defend democracy. Macron supports a ban on headscarves for teachers and public servants. His government has closed mosques and deported imams it says were too radical. And in an interview the night Trudeau arrived in France, he described his government's pushback against radical Islam as a reconquest of France. Despite those differences, both leaders believe they have much to gain from a strong partnership and that a unified approach on trade and climate will serve both countries. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Paris.
Trudeau left Paris tonight for London. He's in the UK for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. This is likely to be the Queen's last appearance at that summit, and that has many wondering who will replace her. As Thomas Degla reports, younger royals have already been tasked with bringing the Commonwealth into a new era.
Nothing says welcome to Britain like a handshake from a prince. It's the regal charm offensive meant to guarantee ties between today's royals and tomorrow's Commonwealth.
Across all the different events, you'll be seeing a lot of the royal family.
Sure, right now it's hard to imagine the Commonwealth without the Queen. Since 1973 in Ottawa, she's barely missed any of these leaders' summits. This time, even the venue's named after her.
We all know the Queen has loved the Commonwealth her whole life. She committed herself to it at the age of 21, and she's never stopped.
It's a relationship rooted in history, and the 53-member flags flying in London are a reminder of that. Many have already done away with the British crown, and the wind of change keeps blowing. It won't be on the official agenda, but when leaders from all those countries meet, behind the scenes, they're expected to discuss the thorny issue of succession. Who will become the next head of the Commonwealth once the Queen dies? She favors her son, Charles, who already often represents the Queen, like on this recent trip to Australia. As the next monarch, he's the obvious pick for the next head of the Commonwealth, but the roles are separate, and some want to break with tradition.
Maybe it's a time to say, well, actually, the Commonwealth should decide who its own president is on a rotational basis.
Thank you very much.
As government leaders meet this week, there'll be no vote on the headship, only private talks leading to an eventual consensus on who will take on the ceremonial role.
If there is a consensus that the headship should be passed on and agreed privately, then once the monarch dies, it could then be in the accession proclamation.
In other words, the plans will likely remain under wraps until his mother is gone and he becomes king. Thomas Dagg with CBC News, London.
And much more ahead on tonight's show. Elon Musk has had to slam the brakes on his Tesla Model 3 again, but can anything really slow him down?
You almost never see a public company miss its guidance by that much. It's a real issue because if anyone loses confidence in this company, they depend on having a high stock price to actually fund the business operations.
Tonight on The National, we are learning more about Kumar Kanagaratnam, one of the men police believe Bruce McArthur killed. Kanagaratnam went missing in 2015 after coming to Canada as a refugee, and his mother and cousin spoke exclusively to CBC News from Sri Lanka about his disappearance.
2-3 days la call daily call edukiravar days call edukirena naanga call panni paathanga call panni paatha phone vela seiyala off la irundhathu.
What they're talking about there was in August 2015. And since Kanagaratnam disappeared, the family says they were too afraid to call police to ask for help. You see, they thought he was trying to disappear after his refugee application was rejected. They thought they were protecting him from being sent back home.
Missing report kodukela enna ivara visa illa nu solli reject pannitaanga. Ivara அந்த visa illadala அந்த மறைஞ்சி இருக்கிறார் சிலவள அங்க இருந்து திருப்பி அனுப்பிடுவாங்க. என்ன இங்க இருந்து கஷ்டப்பட்டு தானே இவர அங்க அனுப்பினது. தனக்கு அங்க இருந்து வந்துட்டா இங்க இன்னும் கஷ்டப்படணும்.
Police believe Kanagaratnam was killed sometime in late 2015. His remains were among those found in planters in Toronto. Alleged serial killer Bruce McArthur has been charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder. After days of protests, Starbucks says it plans to close 8,000 U.S. locations for an afternoon next month to give employees racial bias training. The move comes after 2 black men were arrested last week at a Starbucks in Philadelphia, accused of trespassing. They were just waiting for a friend. Starbucks CEO has since apologized for the arrests.
We have had direct talks at very high levels, extremely high levels, with North Korea.
That was U.S. President Donald Trump earlier today, pulling back the curtain on preps for a planned face-to-face meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. There are reports tonight that CIA Director Mike Pompeo made a top-secret trip to North Korea over the Easter weekend to meet with Kim himself. According to Trump, 5 locations are being considered right now for those future talks.
There is more trouble for Tesla today. The company announced it is temporarily shutting down production of the Model 3. The electric sedan is supposed to be Tesla's mass-market breakthrough. More than 500,000 people have already put down deposits, and this is just the latest in a series of setbacks for Tesla. Last month in California, a Tesla SUV on autopilot crashed and killed the driver. A week later, Tesla recalled more than 120,000 of the Model S because of a problem with the power steering. Add to that a shareholder lawsuit over the company's takeover of a solar energy company run by Elon Musk's cousins, and serious concerns with the company's balance sheet. But Tesla's defenders remain undaunted. The question is that faith misguided? Here's Aaron Saltzman.
They came one by one, driven by a deep-rooted belief, a gathering of the faithful.
Just a quick show of hands. I am seeing some new faces. Who's new face? First time ever at a meeting.
This is the Tesla Owners Club of Ontario. They congregate monthly.
We were actually the first sanctioned club in the world, officially from Tesla.
I believe in the EV movement, and I just wanted to be part of it.
I'm investing in Tesla, but his vision as well. I think it's an inevitable outcome. Full electric vehicles is the future.
He is Tesla CEO Elon Musk.
Musk is a true visionary. I would love to meet the man one day and just shake his hand and say, you know, good for you. I love what you're doing. I love the idea that you had.
It's the only way they can make money.
The converted are steadfast in their conviction, but outside the tent, some cracks are beginning to show.
Sells you the next dream.
Short sellers like Jim Chanos are all over the business news. They make money betting a company's stock will fall. Still, listen to this.
Do you have a price target in mind?
Well, we think the equity's worthless, so how's zero?
Zero. That's a pretty aggressive one.
No, we think the equity's not worth anything.
This is a company that once briefly surpassed General Motors to become the most valuable automaker in the United States. Musk is promising a sustainable future, building rockets to put people on Mars. He's become a celebrity CEO.
You're Elon Musk. I am?
Are you sincerely trying to save the world?
Well, I'm trying to do good things, yeah. I mean...
But the savior is struggling. Tesla is spending far more than it earns. It's piling up debt. Its credit rating has just been slashed.
I worry a lot about this company.
Charlie Grant writes the column Heard on the Street for the Wall Street Journal. He says Tesla's troubles began not long after the launch of the company's most important product.
All right, let's bring him out.
With a price starting at $35,000, the Model 3 is Tesla's entry-level vehicle. It was supposed to push the company to profitability, but it has been beset by production problems. Musk promised to produce 20,000 Model 3s per month by the end of last year. In reality, they were only managing to make about 1,500.
You almost never see a public company miss its guidance by that much.
That is a big deal. Because Tesla isn't making a profit, it can't use its own money to finance growth and cover losses, so it has to issue new shares. But it can only do that if the current stock price stays high.
It's a real issue because if anyone loses confidence in this company, you know, they depend on having a high stock price to actually fund the business operations.
So there are some on Wall Street who look at Tesla and see a car company with shaky financials. But there are others who say the numbers don't tell the whole story.
I'm not actually a big proponent of the kind of multipliers that we use.
Professor Melissa Schilling teaches strategy and innovation at New York University's Stern School of Business. She says the comparison shouldn't be between Tesla and another auto company. It should be between Elon Musk and others like him.
Think about how people underestimated Steve Jobs in the early part of his career and how crucial he was to the success of that company and how he diversified into products we never dreamed Apple would be in. We didn't think Apple would go into iPods. We didn't think Apple would go into phones, and they changed the world with that phone.
Musk also wants to change the world, she says. Financial success is secondary.
You got to know that when you invest in this company or in this man, you're investing in a mission, and the mission isn't just about money.
Back in Ontario, the Tesla Owners Club is also on a mission, a weekend driving rally to new superchargers.
It works. Thank you.
We like to talk to people and educate them about electric vehicles, and especially, of course, Teslas.
A visible show of faith to help spread the word.
You guys are evangelists.
Yeah, I really think we are. And
John Dixon is head of the Owners Club. This is his third Tesla. He has an order in for a fourth. His faith in Elon Musk unwavering.
Because he truly believes in the vision of reducing our carbon footprint and reducing the pollution that cars offer to the into the atmosphere.
To him, Tesla's financial problems are incidental. It's about belief in a bigger picture, and his is stronger than ever. Aaron Saltzman, CBC News, Toronto.
A lot of people seem to share some of that faith, including here in Canada. More than 18,000 plug-in electric vehicles were sold in this country last year. That's an all-time high, up 68% from 2016. Tesla was the brand of choice, selling almost 3,500 Model S's and X's combined.
She embraced her white hair. She often donned a fake pearl necklace and was known as everybody's grandmother. Former First Lady Barbara Bush died today at the age of 92. We'll look back at her life and legacy next on The National.
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
Cambridge Analytica was here.
We have our share of terrorists.
I remember standing over her and she's dead.
Did I ever think I'm going to end up in prison? Of course I didn't.
Russia, if you're listening,
you just can't make it up.
CBC Dogs, now streaming.
Super cool. It's friggin' super cool.
It's okay to date the crazy guys.
A $27 million lawsuit against the federal government is going back to court. Abu Sufyan Abdelrazak is a Sudanese Canadian. He was never charged with a crime, but says he was tortured when he was detained in Sudan for 6 years. He blames Ottawa for not bringing him home sooner. And while talks to settle the issue have been in the works, his lawyer says the government has abruptly called them off. And in the meantime, CBC News has obtained court documents that shed light on the lengths Canada's spy agency and the former Conservative government went to keep Abdelrazak from coming home. Murray Brewster has the details.
It has been more than a decade since Abu Sufyan Abdelrazak was in a Sudanese prison. Yet, the experience haunts him.
I've been like stand up against the wall for several hours. I've been beaten by the hose. And I've been hung from my hand.
He was long suspected by CSIS of being an al-Qaeda terrorist. Sudanese security picked him up in September 2003 while he was visiting family.
What did they tell you? Yeah, they told me like the Canadian asked for your detention and the American. The Canadian and the American, both of them.
CSIS has always denied it wanted him held. This former Foreign Affairs intelligence officer doesn't believe it.
Our belief, and it's a belief that I still harbor, is that it was the CIA that solicited Abdul-Razik's detention from the Sudanese authorities, possibly suggesting that they were acting on behalf of CSIS.
These Canadian diplomatic cables obtained by CBC News show CSIS denials were deemed not credible by the Sudanese, who told Canadians in Khartoum all of the trouble started because Canada sent a security officer who talked to the Sudanese Security Division and told them to hold Mr. A. The cables and other documents released as part of Abdul-Razik's $27 million lawsuit against the federal government also show CSIS gave Foreign Affairs in Ottawa conflicting stories on when they knew about his arrest.
There were portions of this case where we had inadequate information from CSIS. There were portions of the case where we felt CSIS went behind our backs to take actions that we didn't agree with.
Did CSIS lie to you?
We have still not been able to get to the bottom of this.
This former CSIS analyst says the Sudanese may have it wrong.
Why would CSIS order Abdul-Razik picked up?
It wouldn't. I find that very hard to believe.
And he says there may be reasons Foreign Affairs was in the dark.
When you work for a security service, you share information with agencies which should have access on a need-to-know basis.
CSIS claimed Abdul-Razik was a dangerous al-Qaeda terrorist, even though he had never been charged with any crime. The documents show, while consular officials were trying to get him out, CSIS argued to keep him detained. The spy service kept up an ongoing dialogue with Sudanese intelligence that directly contradicted Canadian diplomats. CSIS also supported putting him on a U.S. no-fly list and a UN terror watch list.
Totally egregious disregard.
Critics say the spy service overstepped its bounds.
There should absolutely be an investigation to determine whether there's been criminal infractions there.
CSIS, the Justice Department, and Public Safety will not comment with the matter before the courts. This entire experience haunts Abdul-Razik. He is asked, even today, if he is a terrorist.
I'm not Al-Qaeda. I'm not. I don't have nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. I'm not.
And Murray Brewster joining us right now. Murray, that interview with Abdul-Razik, so revealing, as are those court documents. What more can you tell us on that front?
Well, there are a lot of court documents to go through, Andrew, and a lot of threads to pull on. And we've got a lot of information here that fills in holes in Abdul-Razik's story that have existed for many, many years. Significantly, what we have among these documents is a list of questions that CSIS provided to the Department of Foreign Affairs in the event that consular officials actually did get in to see him. Now, why this is significant is because when Abdul-Razik eventually made it home in 2009, he claimed that he was tortured by the Sudanese, and he also claimed that the questions were provided by the Canadians. And this is the first time that we have actually seen a list of questions that CSIS provided. But Abdul-Razik is in a much better position to explain what happened.
What did the Sudanese say to you while they were torturing you? Did they get to try to confess anything?
Yeah, to convince the questions which is the Canadians sent to them. Yeah, because I saw that the investigator who opened the drawer and he asked me a question from the paper. But
so what you're saying is that they were torturing you because they wanted to get answers to questions that Canadian officials had presented to them.
Yes, that's what I believe.
Now, one other point to mention in the documents as well. In 2009, former Foreign Affairs Minister Lawrence Cannon refused to sign an emergency passport to bring Abdul-Razik home. What we've learned from these documents is that he did so against the advice of his officials at Foreign Affairs, and that is incredibly significant. We should mention that we did reach out to Lawrence Cannon, and he said that we should be talking to government lawyers, and they, of course, are not talking about the case. Andrew?
Murray Brewster, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Former U.S. First Lady Barbara Bush has died. Known as the Rock of the Bush family, she and her husband, George Bush Sr., were virtually inseparable for decades. Here's a look at her life and legacy.
Can I get a little hug?
Sure. Public service had been a theme in Barbara Bush's family life. Growing up, her own father was a distant relative of America's 14th president, Franklin Pierce. But after she married George Herbert Walker Bush in 1945, that public service, as well as family devotion, would define her life. In 1946, their first child was born, future President George W. Bush. Together, the couple weathered a series of tragedies. Barbara's mother was killed in a car accident in New York, but she was too pregnant with daughter Pauline to travel to the funeral. 4 years later, Pauline died of leukemia. It was during that traumatic period that Barbara's hair turned permanently white. The family rebounded, moved to Midland, Texas, and George turned from oil to politics, with Barbara as his trusted sounding board.
Faith we had was extraordinary. And then it was strengthened, I think, by our love for each other.
By the time George became vice president, she had become something of a Washington star. Socially confident, unpretentious, that all made her popular with foreign dignitaries. When her husband won the White House, she eschewed the glitz and glamour of her predecessor, Nancy Reagan, and wore a pair of practical $29 shoes to the inaugural ball, plus that triple strand of fake pearls that would become her signature look. She also threw herself into promoting literacy, a cause that would help define the rest of her life through the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy.
I chose literacy because I honestly believe that if more people could read, write, and comprehend, we would be that much closer to solving so many of the problems that plague our nation and our society.
When eldest son George W. took the White House, he too relied on her strength and judgment. His younger brother Jeb did as well during his run for the Republican nomination in 2016. As Barbara and George Sr. withdrew from public life, they only drew closer together, especially as age took its toll. Last year, they were even hospitalized together with respiratory problems. In a statement this weekend, a Bush family spokesperson revealed Barbara was in failing health and had chosen to remain at home with family rather than seek more medical help. Barbara Bush was 92. And so the tributes are pouring in tonight from her son, George W. Bush. Mom kept us on our toes and kept us laughing until the end. I am a lucky man that Barbara Bush was my mother. From President Donald Trump, she will be long remembered for her strong devotion to country and family, both of which she served unfailingly well. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Barbara Bush leaves a legacy of dignity, grace, service, and devotion to family.
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
Cambridge Analytica was here.
We have our share of terrorists.
I remember standing over her and she's dead.
Did I ever think I'm gonna end up in prison? Of course I didn't.
Russia, if you're listening.
You just can't make it up.
CBC Dogs, now streaming.
How do we describe personal best?
It's a great question.
Self-improvement for people who are not into self-improvement.
We'll tackle the stuff you'd be too embarrassed to go to an attractive, wealthy success guru for.
I'm horrible at having conversations with cashiers.
I have a complete inability to get up on time.
I can't swim.
I would like to help a cow give birth to its calf.
Yeah, I think we can help with
I think we can do that.
Tonight on The National, there are reports that chemical weapons inspectors have finally reached the Syrian town of Douma. That's according to Syrian state media. They're there to investigate allegations of chemical weapons use 10 days ago, believed to have killed dozens of people. Syria and Russia deny the allegations, but late last week, the US, Britain, and France launched retaliatory airstrikes. Another twist today in the Stormy Daniels controversy. Today, the porn star released this sketch of a man who she says threatened her after she agreed to sell her story about an alleged affair with Donald Trump. Daniels is offering $100,000 to anyone who can identify the man in the sketch. The White House has denied the affair happened.
I'm winding down here, and they're going to run out of time. One last chance. Downey, no! It's a Vegas jackpot!
And with that, a history-making moment for the NHL. Just a little while ago, the Vegas Golden Knights became the first team in its inaugural season to sweep a Stanley Cup playoff series. They knocked out the LA Kings after beating them 1-0 in tonight's Game 4. So they move on to the second round, but we're still waiting to see who they'll play against.
Former FBI Director James Comey's tell-all book went on sale early today. And while the memoir is getting lots of attention for its critique of Trump, there's also an unexpected Canadian connection. The first chapter of his book opens up with a quote from singer-songwriter Jan Arden. It reads, "To not think of dying is to not think of living." So I pointed this out to Jan last night on Twitter, and her video response is our moment of the day.
It's been an interesting 24 hours. To be quoted in the James Comey book is a really surreal experience. I mean, of the millions of people that he could have quoted. Little old me, but it's pretty cool. Rosie Barton, she tweeted me and she said, "Hey, Jan, are you aware that this happened?" Anyway, I've had an outpouring of, friends and acquaintances and people going, "Oh my God, you're in this book, and I wonder if Donald Trump's going to call you. I hope he doesn't." Yeah, it's really cool. And Rosie Barton, The National. Of course it's The National that tells me about everything that's going on in the world. Yeah, very cool.
So I had a copy of the book before it went on sale. That's how I found that before anyone else. But he has epigraphs, quotes before every chapter. The other people that he quotes, Margaret Thatcher, Dwight Eisenhower, Mark Twain. That's pretty good company.
It
for
is
Jan.
good company. I actually wrote to her last night to say, not to be rude, but did you actually say that? Because my thought was, if the first sentence in his book is fake, then this is a whole separate story.
Yeah.
She said, "Oh no, it's me. I'm not sure if it was a book. I think it was in a magazine interview, but yes, 100%, those are my words."
Wow. Well, there you go. I suppose the takeaway is you never know where your words will end up, because clearly, I mean, she could not have ever in a million years suspected that she'd end up somehow in some small way right in between a war between a U.S. president and a former FBI director. But there you go, improbable as it may be. That is the National.
I'm only on chapter 2 for the record.
Still a long way to go. That's the National for this April 17th. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.